based on what, Peter, you think the renminbi will eventually become a global currency, and how long it take to get there?
First of all, China now is #1 in export globally, #2 in import. And I think within the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be the biggest trade nation in the world. And according to HSBC, China's GDP is going to be roughly equal to that of the United States by 2050. So because of that, you would want to have your own currency. Now today, China has become the biggest buyer of crude oil in the world. And also, going into the future, China right now has about 250 million middle-class people. And I think by another 10, 15 years, it's going to be 500 million. So because of that figure, China will continue to buy. China will need a lot of natural resources like the oil, rice, any kind of food. And also, as China continues to grow, RMB becoming an international currency or have some sort of convertibility is inevitable. It won't be totally convertible, but I think the current account, which is basically trade, will be quite freely convertible. But as far as capital accounts is concerned, we probably think there will still be restrictions because China is concerned that if there are large hedge funds moving in and out of China, it will disturb the financial stability of China. So it will be a managed convertibility, something like Singapore. But I think that it will still have some sort of convertibility.
Being successful, global currency must bear something. The first thing is that it's a big concept. The concept of the large and the big, because you got to be big enough in the whole market and the people can see you. So what he's doing is that we'll check the second thing. How deep is your domestic financial market? So we can get a very good liquidity when I use your own currency. And third story is even further. It's a story of health. That means when you're moving on, everything is so predictable. And so people can tell himself or herself that you are healthy enough moving forward. Not only in the right direction, but along the path, we are sure you have got right the map, okay, and the right sequence. In the future, China should do more and do better, not only in telling the story we are big, but we've got to tell the story we are very healthy, and also our market is deepening.
Today's topic is Hong Kong's place in a changing world economic scenario, the road to 2020.
The growth of Hong Kong, obviously, Hong Kong is a small city, is a small place. The integration with China is something which is very important for Hong Kong people to accept. I'm positive. The one good thing is I'm still positive on Hong Kong because of the two things, our rule of law, which differentiates us. That's our advantage over China. People trust the brand. No matter as much as we're trying to destroy it, people still trust Hong Kong. So there's a bright future, but you guys better be the thinkers for the future. We must also not forget about the rest of the world. Hong Kong was always built as an international city. We've always been the foremost of internationalism, and people, when they think of China, they think of Hong Kong first, and we have that brand. The most important thing is to continue to build that brand, to continue to go out and visit the other cities, the important cities around the world, sell the virtues of Hong Kong as a service industry, of the benefits, because, as I said, our edge is the rule of law, and people do trust around the world, do trust Hong Kong. So when they want to do business in China, they still would love to have a head office in Hong Kong because they know that they understand the way we do business.
Now, all this means that you will definitely need to have a more sophisticated underlying infrastructure to support the ongoing growth of China. That means more participation. So we need to rise up to the challenge and really get ourselves together, focusing on the infrastructure, focusing on talents, focusing on education. Otherwise, we will not have the pool of succession in the industry. There will be a few important roles that Hong Kong will continue to play going forward into the 2020. Number one is on the renminbi and internationalization opportunities. Number two, upon the CEPA, particularly in the Guangdong province, how Hong Kong can actually further expand our regional hub in financial sector, also help to create a de facto South China within the Guangdong area where Hong Kong will play a role to grow Hong Kong as much as in land. There's no way that there's whatever 200 square kilometers, which is 20% of Hong Kong, or 30%, 300 kilometers, is going to be able to satisfy the 7 million, 14 million, or 21 million potential demand for property in Hong Kong. It needs to grow beyond the current boundaries of Hong Kong. Same for the financial underlying infrastructure, and that Hong Kong has a key role to play. And third and finally is continue to focus on maintaining and developing Hong Kong as the wealth management hub in Asia, and particularly perform the role for China.
So Ron, what do you think about business ethics compliance from your various experience and roles in the financial community in Hong Kong?
I think ethics today, if I could use that word, is a much broader subject. Generally speaking, a lot of it is now written in the rules, or indeed you find in different areas of the law. Ethics and compliance really goes hand in hand, because there's no point having ethics if there's no enforcement or compliance. So that's got to be really a carrot and a stick. And the carrot is that companies that are known for good corporate governance generally tend to be valued better than companies that perhaps have a track record of mistreating minority shareholders, or giving inadequate information, or late with their accounts, etc., and all that. So all of that really becomes quite important when you actually go public as a company. Why investors come to Hong Kong, and why the confidence in our market, also because of the rule of law and our legal system. Our courts are extremely well run, extremely well respected by the business and financial community globally.
Why don't, Laura, you first give us sort of your view on this?
Whenever a scandal happened, if you look to the root of it, it is there was something wrong with the way they did business. Either it's misinformation to the public that's misleading the shareholders, there was no business ethic. There was fraudulent aspect of transactions by the companies, whether it is in trading, whether it is a rogue trader, it's someone that was not being properly supervised. So, when it comes down to it, business ethics, or the lack of it, is the cause of many of the crises that have deep implications in the community, in society. What is compliance? Compliance is when some of these basic ethical standards have been codified in rules and regulations. And then, you can have compliance, because you look at the rule book, what are required, and is a company following all that is required of it. So, sometimes when we say you not only have to do the right thing, you have to do it right. You have to do the right thing in the right way. Whenever we want to enact a rule, there are two basic questions that we want to ask. First, what is the regulatory objective? What are we trying to regulate? It's not always that simple. Because the regulatory objective have to be balanced with regulatory cost. What is the cost to the community, to the investment community, to the shareholders, to the investor community. There is a cost.
What are the major trends that you see that will affect all of us in the next, decades to come, right? And 2050, where are we going to be in 2050?
So if I look at your generation, the next 30 years, where do I see the forces, how they operate? I think if I harp on the same themes, technology and globalization, I see that technological advances will continue, and certainly that has already leveled the playing field in the world. But I think that next 30 years, I think the technological advances will make globalization more democratic. In the next 30 years, I think technological advances will continue. It will level the playing field. So some of the developing countries will catch up, and some of the countries like China, who's still developing, but already a world power, will find that they can use technology to achieve better allocation of economic resources. Maybe perhaps in the next generation we can see that countries are more optimistic about themselves, and they can organize economy, industries, markets around their national identity. It doesn't mean that globalization is stopped. It doesn't mean that. But I think we will have a sort of resurgence of national identity. I also think that the technology is going to be progressing in a fast pace. It will be solving the problems that we face today, both the environmental problem, the food problems, and so on. I think we hope to see the technology used to really improve the quality of life. And the world is getting wealthier, but the resources getting scarce. Hopefully, I think there will be a lot of the technological advances will be helping us to solve those problems, because at the end of the day, it's a quality of life that people are going after.
The good scenario is very much what KC has brought. Asia will be 50% of world GDP, 50% of financial assets, will all be quite prosperous, and life should be fairly good because we are able to use technology, globalization for our benefit. There are 6 conditions which I think are pretty tough. Number 1, inequality is rising. It hasn't been cured. The difference between countries have improved, but within countries, that inequality is a real problem. The second one is getting out of the middle income trap. Since the Second World War, only 5-6 countries have broken into the high income group. The third problem is the huge intensity for natural resources. The fourth one is territorial conflicts, civil unrest, and natural disasters. The fifth one is climate change. If climate change goes according to what the scientists say, and there's actually very little dispute about the science, it's more about the politics, there are a lot of climate change issues that we need to deal with today. And the sixth issue is about weak governance, corruption, incompetence by governments that can set us all back. Now, these 6 conditions are very tough conditions. Now, some countries make it, not all countries make it. So the future could be very good, but whether we make it or not depends upon ourselves. And this is the point I really want to make, Joe. It depends upon all of you. And so it is very important for the young, you who will inherit the future, to shape your future.
But first I'm going to talk about how the global economy is changing. What really comes down to 2 very great trends. A shift in global economic power that's moving from the west to the east, and the emergence of new patterns of trade, which is basically the emerging markets trading with one another, the so-called South-South trade. Perhaps the most obvious changes in the world economy over the last decade have been the continued rise of emerging markets and the relative decline of the developed nations. Recent reports that China will overtake the US as the world's largest economy by the end of 2014 are quite a stark reminder of how this shift of power is starting to change. And we expect the world's emerging markets, expanding at a rate of just short of 5%, will fuel most of the global growth this year. The continued rise of economies in Asia, the Middle East and Latin America will be supported by trade with each other, the so-called South-South trade. And that's a change because the trade patterns of the last 10 years, 15 years, have been the developed world with the emerging markets. So the US with China, Europe with the Middle East, UK with Brazil. That will change. It will be Brazil, China, the Middle East, China. So Hong Kong will actually benefit from all of this because this is a global entrepot. This is a global trading center, shipping center, financial services center. So the more that trade and capital flows, the more that a place like Hong Kong will actually benefit from this by being a completely open economy with shipping, with financial services. This really has become the established point where East meets West, and it's got the enormous advantage of a highly developed legal system, a concentration of skilled professionals, a great education system which you all represent. Hong Kong will benefit greatly from the global financial system and the expansion that's taking place in the decades to come. Now locally here, we also see a huge opportunity in the development of Qinghai and the development of the whole Pearl River Delta. For us, this means investing in a stronger physical presence and greater deployment of capital in regions like Latin America, Middle East and here. Second, we've got to capture the opportunities I mentioned offered by trade growth. There are lessons for you as future leaders as you seek to equip yourself to succeed in the changing world around you. And first of all, challenge the consensus assumption. Nobody spotted the Asian financial crisis coming in 1997. Nobody spotted the global financial crisis coming in 2007. The world tends to converge to a consensus view. And actually social media hasn't helped that, because social media effectively allows herding to take place online and a consensus groupthink to develop instantaneously. You really need to be able to have your own views and to challenge. I think it's also extremely important as well to have strong values. I think that it's in the short term, it's often tempting to take shortcuts and to turn blind eyes. You really need to start developing a normative standard of your own behavior. Because at the end of the day, the way you all interact with one another will define whether or not you're accepted in a social group and whether you're successful. All of business, all of university, all of life is about working in social groups. So unless you can actually interact with people, develop some form of empathetic or EQ, you will struggle. Okay? You need to be incredibly aware of the impact you have on people, as well as actually being sensitive to the impact they have on you.